Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, July 15th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Professor of History from the University of North Florida, David Courtwright, on the age of addiction, how bad habits became big business. Also on the program today, Nancy Pelosi all in on attacks on progressive freshman congresswoman. And then Trump weighs in with his own special tinge of racism.
I love some of that.
GOP overlords visit their concentration camps as ICE raids begin. And Trump threatens to give the American Community Survey to states so they can gerrymander regarding immigration info as he contemplates dumping Wilbur Ross for blowing it on the census. New poll, Biden, Warren, Sanders all beat Trump. And the capital moved to Jerusalem.
Israel
Enters the Democratic primary. And what's the matter with Kansas? Less, now that taxes have been raised. Trump's proposed EPA rules assaults communities' ability to live safely. And in addition to its illegal so-called safe country Guatemalan deal, Trump looks to frontally assault asylum seekers at our border. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. I have more or less recovered from Netroots Nation. For those of you who listen to the AM Quickie every morning on Friday and Thursday, I did it, and I can tell you that my voice at 7 a.m. or 7:30 a.m. on Friday was not good. I think a lot of people were not even clear that it was me. But feeling a little better. Still working on that quickie in the morning. And if you have thoughts, send us your thoughts at majorityreporters@gmail.com. The length, the format, the content, the production values, whatever you want to weigh in with, we will take your criticism or your praise, if you like it. You can send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. We're going to keep it on the Majority Report stream for at least a couple more weeks, and then we will branch it off, and you'll have to sign up for it. It'll be a freebie, of course, and hopefully we'll have some advertising. We'll see how that goes. Just one of the innovations that we've been working on in the Majority Report labs here deep in the bowels of the HQ at in the Majority Report. And also a reminder, it is your memberships that make this show work. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. So obviously a lot to talk about. We have a guest. We will at the very least, what we don't end up talking about today, we will cover tomorrow. We'll have a news day. But some of the most despicable video footage I think I've ever seen. In some way, it's despicable because it was just so calm and creepy. This is Mike Pence, Vice President of the United States, with, I think, Tom Tillis and Lindsey Graham, maybe one other white senator, male senator, going in and touring the facilities at their concentration camp. And it is stunning. And after a while, you start to wonder, like, why would they release this? And then when you note that it's only men that they're showing, they're walking in, they're overseeing a cage full, and I mean full, of men from Central America who, at the beginning of this, basically said they haven't had, they need showers. Like they're not getting, there's no hygiene here. And it's eerie because they don't, the vice president, the senators don't seem to have any reaction to it. They just are sort of overlooking it, almost like they're chattel. And it's also, what is eerie about it is, part of that is because they don't go up and say, well, how's it going? There's no sense that they're looking at human beings. It looks like they are looking at animals or some commodity. It's really, really creepy. Here it is. Pause it. I mean, just like, like Pence doesn't even seem to be looking at the people. He seems to be looking at the guards. And you could see behind Pence over his right shoulder, there's a guard on a sort of an elevated tower. And he seems to be looking at the towers. And the agent, the officer, whatever you want to call him, next to him, says that they are looking to see if there's a rowdy one, and they pull him out. Here it goes.
Put the watchtowers up here. The watchtowers help us pick out anyone that gets rowdy so we can pull them out quickly.
And then the men appear to lie down, I guess, to show them that there's no room for everybody to sleep in there, these things. And they're lying down with these foil blankets. And my understanding about these foil blankets, and maybe someone can correct me if listeners know any more about it, but my understanding about these things, they're great if you're in a cold weather situation, because they completely trap the heat. But they're not in a great situation if you're not in a cold weather situation, which is my understanding why they're keeping it at 60 degrees in there. Because you start to sweat very quickly with these things if it's not cold enough in there. But of course, if you don't put it on, you're freezing. And you're lying on a cement floor. And here's the point. We look at this and we go, they're exposed. How could they do this? How could they show us this? How could they show us the inhumanity there. That is not a bug, folks. They want their people to see this. That's why it's just men. Because they're savvy enough to realize, like, well, kids, children, that may be a little bit too much. Because there are kids and children. There's no reason to believe they're in any better situation than these men. But when they show 380 men in what looks to me to be like half of a basketball court behind a cage in there for 40 days, no showers. When they show men to their people, to their constituents, their voters are happy. They're happy. They like it. It makes them feel good. Makes them feel like their government is doing something. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. I mean, and I don't know how far it goes. Like, this is just a weird moment to, well, it's more than that, obviously. But it's a very strange moment to experience where you start to see this type of stuff. And where does it go? Like, this is the new baseline, right? Where, and here's the bottom line. Like, I don't know. Well, look, we didn't have this level of immiseration that we were causing with people. I don't know that we've ever had it, at least in the modern times. We had internment camps with Japanese during World War II. Obama deported a lot of people, record numbers. I don't think we had anything like this. And at the very least, we certainly didn't have images of it. And that may be a failure of people like myself. It may be a failure of journalists. It may be a failure of politicians that we didn't have that awareness of it, but it certainly wasn't that bad. When the Trump administration changed and I've mentioned this before, and Jim McGovern, congressman from Worcester, Mass., said that there were decades on Twitter of U.S. asylum and immigration law upheld time and time again by U.S. courts, protects children and families seeking safe haven in the United States. These laws comply with international law, treaties, and agreements the U.S. has signed. This framework's been upheld by past Republican and Democratic administrations, including during periods when the number of migrants coming to our southern border was 2 or 3 times greater than what it is now. Then in 2017, Trump terminated the family case management program that even ICE admits was 99% effective in having these families appear before a court. We've mentioned this in the past. These people in the past would be released on essentially probation or parole and would have to return to the courts because our laws say we must grant them a hearing. And we have not put the funds in to have hearings in as expedited as a manner as Trump would want, or as the Republicans claim they want. They didn't do this when they controlled government, folks. Totally. And 99% effective in having these families appear before a court. The program cost taxpayers about $38 per day per family. In comparison, detaining families costs hundreds of dollars per day. So even if you're not compelled by the humanity or the inhumanity of locking these people up, this is a policy that is not designed to save America anything other than, I don't know, I guess in these people's minds, they're white, the purity of the white culture.
Well, I mean, I was listening to Ronald Reagan's Redirect podcast, and they did a good job pointing out, and you've alluded to this already, that part of the reason they're spending more to be cruel is because they like the propaganda value of that cruelty.
Yeah. They want those images shown not just to their people, but down in Central America. But the problem is you just can't top the difficulty that these people go through in their own home countries. It's just amazing. But you wonder, like, at what point, now that the baseline has been risen, at what point do just people sitting in Brooklyn do something about it? I don't mean, vote for somebody better or get on Twitter. Like, I don't know. I mean, there are people out there that are getting arrested, trying to block these things. I spoke to people in Philadelphia who are, some of these interviews will be on Ring of Fire. I think we'll play them eventually on the show. People who are protesting like private detention facilities. There's one in Pennsylvania. There's 3 in the country for families, 2 in Texas, and 1 happens to be in Pennsylvania. And you can shut those things out, and the analog would be like, drug companies saying we're not going to use our drugs for capital punishment. But I don't know. I wonder how bad it has to get until you're like, wait a second, I've got to sort of like contemplate a whole different set of potential responses at this point.
Yeah, I retweeted a thread or two from some immigrant justice organizations on things people can do to get involved and help.
All right, people can head over to Jamie's Twitter feed for that. Weird to go into some ads after this, but it's the nature of it. Folks, staying properly hydrated, one of the most important factors during the hot summer months. Liquid IV is the fastest, most efficient way to stay hydrated. We all use it in the office. I think we're out actually right now, aren't we? No, 2 more packets. That's why we've all been so healthy. I should have brought a couple down. That's what if I had taken that at Netroots. I use it when I fly. I use it when I occasionally overindulge, which is very rare, ladies and gentlemen. Very rare. But Liquid IV is the fastest growing wellness brand. It can provide the same hydration as drinking 2 to 3 bottles of water, and it contains 5 essential vitamins, including vitamin C, more vitamin C rather than an orange. And it's much potassium as a banana. The way you keep yourself from getting Charlie horses. It's a healthy alternative to traditional sugary sports drinks with no artificial flavors or preservatives. And it's a perfect for fueling tough workouts, preventing muscle fatigue, promoting healthy post-workout recovery. Find them everywhere. Their hydration multiplier is even sold at Costco's nationwide. I love Liquid IV. I know you will too. Right now, my listeners get 25% off at liquidiv.com when you use my code majority at checkout. 25% off anything you order at Liquid IV's website. Go to liquidiv.com, enter my code majority, get the savings, start getting better hydration. That's liquidiv.com, promo code majority. Don't wait. Start properly hydrating today. Also, if you believe you're not being snooped on or that nobody cares about your online data, you're wrong. Your privacy is under attack by hackers, governments, ad companies, ISPs. You need a trusted software that's going to protect your online activity, ExpressVPN. Their apps use powerful encryption to secure your data. ExpressVPN runs in the background of your computer or your phone, your laptop, whenever you use the internet, just like you normally would. Simply download the app, click to connect, and voila, you're protected. ExpressVPN is the fastest VPN. It costs less than $7 a month, and it comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. ExpressVPN uses new cutting-edge technology called Trusted Server, and it makes sure there's no logs of what you do online. So it stops hackers. It stops anybody else who might be snooping on you. And it stops internet companies from grabbing all your data. You can take back your online privacy with ExpressVPN, and that means also protecting all of your passwords. Protect your online activity today. Find out how you can get 3 months free at expressvpn.com/majority. That's expressvpn.com/majority for 3 months free with a 1-year package. Visit expressvpn.com/majority to learn more. And finally, the World Health Organization has named the health epidemic of the 21st century. Do you know what it is? Stress. We're feeling more uncertainty and anxiety than ever before. And that's why we're partnering with Calm. It's the #1 rated app for meditation. When you meditate, your brain chemistry changes. Meditation's been shown to slow down the release of stress chemicals into your bloodstream, like cortisol and adrenaline. It gives you some much needed relief. With Calm, you discover a whole library of simple guided meditations on themes like anxiety, creative, and focus. They even have other resources to help you relax, like sleep stories. It's my favorite. Music and more. So if you're stressed, take a deep breath, get Calm. Right now, Majority Report listeners get 25% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/majority. That's CALM.com/majority. 40 million people have downloaded Calm. Find out why at calm.com/majority. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about our age of addiction and, more importantly, how addiction has been weaponized, or I should say monetized, or weaponized to be monetized, with Professor David Courtwright. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. On the phone, it's a pleasure to welcome history professor, U of North Florida, David Courtwright, author of his latest, The Age of Addiction, How Bad Habits Became Big Business. Professor, welcome to the program.
Hey, Sam. It's good to be with you.
So, let me pull up here my notes. Let's just start with this notion of rather than starting with limbic capitalism, because I think we will get there. Let's talk about the sort of the history of addiction, because in many respects, that's what your book basically takes us through the life of addiction, at least insofar as we've known it as addiction. When did we first contemplate the idea of addiction as opposed to like, sometimes some people really like to do this stuff and it becomes a problem?
Well, it's clear that even in ancient history, people had a conception of addiction, of compulsive behavior that was harmful to the individual, that was characterized by craving, and it was usually associated with things like gambling or alcohol. So for a long time, even though they didn't use the word addiction, the concept was there. The point of the book is that addiction has really exploded in the last 40 or 50 years. So let me ask you a question. If you heard the word addiction 30 or 40 years ago, what did you think of?
Well, I mean, I was young, but I imagine I would have thought about like hard drugs, like heroin or
Exactly.
Heroin.
No, that's exactly right. And now, if you look any place on the internet or you tune into the news or whatever, you're going to hear stories about compulsive overeating or sugar addiction or machine gambling addiction or social media use that's compulsive, internet porn, even habitual tanning. You've got the whole category of addiction has exploded in the last, say, 30 or 40 years, and that's really what the book is about.
And that explosion of addiction, is that a function of a society that pathologizes things, or is that a function of what we understand addiction has actually increased and encompassed more, I guess, silos of activity?
Well, it's a function of a lot of things. One thing that's happened is the commercialization of vice. So a lot of things that 100 years ago the government tried to suppress in the name of reform, like prostitution or pornography, which back then would have been called obscenity, or even the alcohol industry. A lot of things that the capital P progressives tried to regulate survived the reform onslaught, and then they grew as industries in the mid to late 20th century. But also new technologies have come along, and they have made possible things like compulsive social media use, which no reformer 100 years ago would have even dreamed of. So it's a lot of different things.
All right. Well, let's talk about this concept of limbic capitalism. I mean, when did this? Well, tell us about it first.
Well, okay, so the word limbic refers to the region of your brain that's responsible for pleasure and motivation and long-term memory and other really important functions that are linked to survival, and they're linked to your emotions. You need your limbic system, but paradoxically, other people can capture it, and they can make your limbic system work against you. And basically, limbic capitalism hurts us by undermining our appetite control. I mean, that's really at the core of addiction, is you lose control. And typically take food addiction, for example. Everybody needs food. Food is necessary for survival. But there are some people who have simply lost control of their eating, and that didn't happen by accident. There were people who figured out ways to create more and more delicious and brain-reinforcing foods, and some people became literally addicted to them. And by the way, I don't mean to suggest that everybody who's overweight is an addict. I think that's ridiculous. That's a misuse of the term. But probably a quarter of all people who are grossly overweight fulfill the criteria of full-blown addiction.
But what's the first? Can you pinpoint on like what the first sort of like major push for limbic capitalism would be? I mean, I think like the most obvious answer in my mind is tobacco, right? I mean, you had these companies that were clearly aware of the addictive properties of what they were doing, and hid that.
Yeah, I think that's well put. They didn't necessarily know about the limbic system or the specific neural pathways for how nicotine addicted people, which is evidence that became available in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But they sure as shooting knew that they were dealing with an addictive product, and they mounted a very clever marketing campaign to expand the use of that product. So the classic example is that around 1900, it was mainly men who smoked. And so the industry saw that there was this whole other market, namely women, that if they could valorize cigarette consumption and make it seem glamorous and sexy and very au courant, then they could tap into this other market, which they did. So that the limbic capitalism story is really tied into this larger story of the expansion of marketing and advertising in the 20th century.
And the limbic, the limbic capitalism is just sort of like almost another level of sophistication as to the processes in which this addiction happens.
Yeah, and it's also a reference to the fact that some products are just inherently more dangerous than others. So capitalism in general has a set of problems that are potentially associated with it. I mean, any enterprise, don't keep two sets of books, don't exploit your workers, don't pollute the environment. There's certain rules that ought to apply to any business. But limbic capitalism is different from garden variety capitalism, which just makes ordinary durable goods, insofar as the products themselves are inherently problematic. There's a difference between a company that makes rakes and plows and nails and one that makes internet pornography or video poker machines, if you see what I mean. And that's what I'm trying to get at with this phrase limbic capitalism. There's certain products that target the regions of your brain that are tied into compulsive behavior.
And how sophisticated or how much awareness do those who are selling this stuff have? I mean, we use the example of cigarettes. I think, like famously, I think it was this guy Edward Bernays, who I believe was Freud's like cousin or some relation, who was the one who put the cigarettes in the hands of the suffragette marchers, and that helped with that. I mean, how sophisticated are all of these sort of limbic capitalists?
They are sophisticated, and they've gotten more sophisticated. So you're right. In the early 20th century, in mid 20th century, there's a revolution in advertising. And I spent a lot of time in the advertising archives. Let me tell you, if you want to understand how the world really works, the best place from which to view it is in the collections, the special collections libraries, which have all these internal memoranda that ad executives write to one another. They know how to get you. Let's put it that way. But since then, there's been a kind of quantum leap in the ability to develop and market potentially addictive products, because there are all these new technologies, so that video game designers or computer game designers study patterns of mouse clicks, or they even track where your eyes are on the screen to see which features of a game prototype are most interesting to young players. So they've got all kinds of tools. And that's one of the illusions that people have, I think, about the marketplace, is that a lot of people think, oh, I can control this. You know, I'm in front of a screen, and I can limit the amount of time I spend on it, and all the rest of it. But for no matter how smart you are, there are 1,000 people on the other side of that screen who are smarter than you are, who are figuring out ways to keep you glued to that screen in the new economy of attention. That's what's going on.
Let's just go back just a little bit about to this concept you have of liberating, enslaving pleasures. This is sort of like pre our sophistication in understanding of addiction, just, you know, with some vague notion of like people are doing stuff that's bad for them. But we're talking like in the I guess maybe around the 17th century, 18th century maybe, where you had people using stuff because you know, life was hard and there was moments of escape there. Is that, I mean, what is that paradox of things that both liberate and enslave?
It's a good paradox, actually. So earlier I used the phrase potentially addictive products and services. I try to make the point in the book that these things are not all evil, and they're not all to be avoided, and that in fact they've brought a lot of pleasure and even liberation into human lives in the course of history. I mean, what's the matter with toasting someone with a glass of wine at a wedding feast? Nothing. There's a very humane and liberating aspect to many of these things. On the other hand, there's a potential problem, and the problem is that people will become such heavy consumers that they will harm themselves and generate social costs. And the temptation is for businesses to market these products in a way that they encourage heavy and destructive consumption in a certain subgroup of users, because frankly, that's where they get most of their money. So in the alcohol industry, for example, 80% of the revenues come from 20% of the users. And that's the built-in temptation.
Are you describing, could this arguably just be a problem with capitalism? I mean, because you have a era, pre at least the capitalism that we understand today, and the sort of this I guess late stage of capitalism, where people have access to alcohol, people have access to, I don't know, depending on where they live, like coca or some other a drug, and that on some level, because some people are going to be destroyed by them, but the numbers of people who will be are far less, because the product, as it were, has not been so commodified, and then with this sort of machine behind it to sort of insert it in our lives in a way that has been, that I guess hyperinflates its allure in some way.
Yeah, Sam, listen, you should have written the book and saved me the trouble. I think you just nailed it. I mean, there are lots of things. You use the word commodify. That's part of the problem. There were many products that were not particularly harmful that became more so as a consequence of industrialization and commodification. Cigarettes would be an example, cheap booze, which was ubiquitous by the late 19th century. Another thing that's really important to keep in mind is that the historical context of what constitutes a dangerous product changes. So take alcohol as an example. There was once a time when water was very polluted and full of pathogenic microorganisms, and if you drank water, you were going to get cholera or some other terrible disease. And you were actually better off drinking something like beer. But with the public health reforms and the improvement in sanitation at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, suddenly drinking water is safe. And temperance societies start building what they call temperance fountains, or what we would call water fountains, in many cities. And the message is, drink water, not booze. So that the sort of the risks and benefits of alcohol change in comparison to what the alternative beverages are, if you see what I mean. So it's a little bit tricky to say, these things are always bad or risky or always addictive. But generally speaking, with the passage of time and the growing sophistication of technology and marketing, addiction has definitely expanded.
We should say, it just reminds me that Johnny Appleseed, he was going around growing apple trees. It was all vastly for apple cider. Hard cider.
Absolutely.
Hard cider, I should say.
Absolutely right. Which, by the way, was exempted by the Volstead Act. Something that a lot of people don't know is that the rural interests that supported the Volstead Act, those people were mainly concerned about the working class in cities drinking. And so it's perfectly okay for farmers to keep fermenting their cider and drinking their cider. So there's a kind of double standard that was built into the legislation.
Interesting. And so let's talk about the sort of the anti-vices and the anti-vice activism pro-vice activism. You dedicate a chapter to each, but let's tell us what should we understand about the anti-vice activists? It wasn't simply all puritanical. I mean, I know that for instance, the part of the progressive movement at the time supported prohibition in part because they wanted an income tax, and alcohol had been a source of really the federal government's revenue in terms of taxes, and they wanted to take that off the table for a while.
Yeah, and they're also worried about the corrupting influence of the alcohol industry, which owns a lot of the state legislatures. So this is actually politically, this is really interesting. So the people that historians call capital P progressives, that sort of turn of the last century progressives, were people who believed that it was necessary for the government to intervene in at least certain markets in the interests of economic justice, and also in the case of limbic capitalism, to suppress the consumption of certain products that they thought were bad for the public's health. And they weren't all religious. So there were some people who were religiously conservative people who were, Baptist or Methodist, and they just thought alcohol and tobacco were evil. But there were also secular progressives who thought, you can make a case that these things are harmful and they shorten lives, and we should discourage their use, especially among the young. So they supported everything from out-and-out prohibition to age restrictions on purchasing things like tobacco products, to hours that saloons could operate. There's a spectrum of regulation that comes out of the progressive era. And it's not just in the United States. This book, The Age of Addiction, is a global history. And one of the things I try to show is that there were anti-vice progressives in every country. In fact, you know who the biggest anti-vice progressive in the world was in the late 19th and the early 20th century?
No.
Gandhi. It's Gandhi. We immediately think of Carrie Nation or somebody, but the person who is probably the most famous and consistent anti-vice activist is Gandhi, who thinks that she shouldn't smoke, that the government should enact prohibition, that opium production needs to be curtailed, that these things are bad for people. And you can find people all over the world who adhere to this. And if I could just extend that thought, what's interesting today is that there's a split among progressives, let's say small p progressives. There are economic progressives who feel still very strongly that it's the business of the government to regulate markets and to regulate capitalist enterprise, but they don't like the drug war, and they don't like religious conservatives, and they don't like anything that smacks of Puritanism. And so there's this very pronounced ambivalence about the government interfering with markets in what used to be called vice. In fact, they don't even want to use the word vice. So they're torn. On the one hand, they embrace the principle of government regulation, but they think, if you let the government loose on drugs, we're going to have another racist drug war, and so on. So there's this real tension, I think, within the left today.
Well, I would add, too, for instance, in the context of, let's say, in New York City, Bloomberg got rid of sugary drinks. Like, you couldn't buy a sugared drink that was larger. They couldn't have a soda fountain that was larger than 20 ounces, let's say, I think it was.
Right.
And in many respects, it's a little bit regressive in terms of a policy. It also doesn't address sort of some of the, and we see this with other sort of products that were sold in terms of like with trans fat and whatnot, that it sort of, I guess as a unintended consequence, or one that people were aware of, would maybe punish people who live in food deserts in certain urban areas and whatnot. But this dilemma extends itself Where, I mean, I guess this is a question of, I mean, there's sort of like a weird sort of cross section of things like libertarianism and the sort of the definition of freedom in some respects. Well, go ahead.
So two things about Bloomberg. One, let's be clear, the people who funded the repeal campaign in New York City, that was the food industry and the sugar industry, and they appropriated libertarian arguments.
Right.
I agree with you that libertarians didn't like Bloomberg's nanny regulations, as they were called, but the people who paid for the posters and the ads mocking Bloomberg, that came from the industry because they were afraid about sales. And
I'm cynical enough to believe there's not that much daylight between those two separate groups of people anyways. I mean,
well, all right, that may be as is. But the other thing that's important to understand is that Bloomberg wins in the end. All right, so there are now a number of cities across the United States that tax sugary beverages. Mexico has imposed a tax on sugary beverages. The World Health Organization has endorsed the concept as sound public health policy. So his problem was not that he was wrong, it was more like he was premature, because the idea is, in fact, catching on in other places.
Well, and also on the other end of that, the U.S. government heavily subsidizes it's corn syrup, but the sugar that goes in those sugary products.
Yeah, well, one of about 50 examples of where the left hand of the U.S. government doesn't know what the right hand is doing. I mean, you're right. That's a point that just drives critics of the food industry crazy. Is you get one department in the government giving you good advice about what constitutes a healthy diet, and then you have other branches of the government that are subsidizing the mass production of unhealthful foods. Go figure. I think that's a familiar story to anybody, at least in American history, which is one of my fields. Going all the way back to the New Deal, is that you'll often have government agencies and government programs working at cross purposes, which turns out to be one of the libertarian objections to government action, is because they fear that inevitably there'll be this kind of a screw up.
As a father of a 14-year-old girl, we have to talk a little bit about digital addiction and particularly mobility. You're right that there's basically three, I guess, things that sort of our connectivity does in terms of enhancing limbic capitalism. It's the connectivity and mobility itself and the products that it promotes. It's the use of the internet to sort of hyper, I guess, charge older addictions, and that in both instances, both these things have been engineered to really zero in on our vulnerabilities, I guess, as human beings, and exploit those. I mean, and I guess this includes like things like gamification and beyond. But talk about the. I mean, I think it's fairly obvious that if people were prone to having a pornography addiction or gambling addiction, or I guess maybe even in some instances medications, the internet is going to sort of like enhance that as a delivery mechanism and sort of get rid of barriers to the bar to entry or the bar to addiction, I guess. But then there's something addictive in and of itself to the connectivity. Talk about that.
Well, so one of the things that I discovered is that, again, looking at history, if you try to think what are the preconditions for mass addiction, there are 5 things, and they all start with the letter A, so it's easy to remember. Accessibility, affordability, advertising, anonymity, meaning that if you're in an environment where nobody else knows that you're doing this, it's easier. And then finally, anomie, or basically social and moral alienation. Those are the five big contributing factors to mass addiction. And if you think about it, the internet basically supercharges all five of those things. It's 5 for 5. And I think you're also right that in addition to making things like pornography or gambling or drugs or how do you use drugs or how do you grow marijuana, providing that kind of information to people or that kind of content, in addition to doing that, there are certain fetishes that develop around the technology itself. So that in the literature, for example, there's a whole literature on phantom vibrations, where people get so tuned in to their smartphone in their hip pocket that they think it's vibrating when it's not.
Get it? I got it. I have that.
Okay. All right. Okay. So you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
All right. So it's a conditioned response. I mean, it's just ABC of psychology. It's a conditioned response. And one of the really fascinating things to me was how that elites, especially Silicon Valley elites, are very aware of the addictive potential of this technology, whether it's by accident or by design. But increasingly, they're sending their own children to what you might call digitally decluttered schools, or they're going off screen themselves. To me, it's fascinating that which used to be free, which is face-to-face human interaction, has become a luxury good. It's almost like it's a mark of social status or a sign of upward mobility. So if you walk into a restaurant and you see a bunch of apparently well-educated people having a lively conversation at a dinner table, and then at the next table there are a bunch of kids who are lost in their smartphones, just ignoring one another, which of those two groups would you guess is upwardly mobile?
Right. I think there's like these Waldorf schools, now these private schools that have been around for quite a while that eschew those type of things. And all right, well, let me. So what can be done? I mean, you addressed this. It really does seem to be a question of society. To sort of, on some level, Bloomberg, in terms of his sugary drinks, may have provided some type of answer. And maybe before we get that, I should just say that my understanding is that the research on the mobile phones, this latest generation, like kids literally my daughter's age, are unique in terms of, the demographic studies have shown like a dramatic change in children, essentially, or young teens, in terms of their generation, in terms of like things like drug use, alcohol use, teen pregnancy and whatnot, but rises in anomie, as you say, and depression and anxiety because specifically of the mobility that comes with a phone, as opposed to even in like an iPad, apparently. So with this sort of knowledge that we have this is a real health crisis, right? I mean, this is like in the same way we have a measles outbreak and they say, okay, we're going to moratorium on your ability to avoid getting vaccinations. There has to become a society-wide understanding that this is a public health crisis.
Well, it is insofar as things like distracted driving really can kill you. You're right. I mean, there is a risk to life and limb, although you have to be careful to distinguish between that risk and, say, the risk posed by cigarettes. Although just in listening to what you were saying, I had a thought, which is maybe each generation has a special vulnerability. So if you grew up in the United States in the 40s and 50s, the thing that was going to get you, the big threat, was cigarette smoking, which was very, very widespread, especially among the young at the time. And now that increasingly the threat comes from digital technologies, which, whatever they may or may not do for your health, are really bad news when it comes to education, for example. There's a massive amount of digital distraction that doesn't help learning. You're right about that. As to your first question, what can we do about this? I think tax policy is part of the example. Part of the solution to the problem. I think that Bloomberg was on the right track, and I think that it's not just sugary drinks. I wouldn't limit it to that. I think that alcohol and a lot of other things are undertaxed. I think getting serious about enforcing age restrictions. I think government monopolies for certain kinds of really addictive products like Schedule II and Schedule III controlled substances. That's a policy option that's out there. I mean, if you take something like opioids, we have to have opioids. They are life-saving in certain circumstances. These are valuable medicines, but do you want them necessarily marketed by private enterprise that's seeking to maximize profits for that particular category of products? By the way, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just thinking out loud here. But certainly 100 years ago, there were people who would make the argument that alcohol is an inevitable presence in our society, and so therefore we would be better off if all of the pubs and the saloons and the taverns were run by the government and strictly managed by the government, so that the saloon keepers were put on a salary and they didn't have the incentive to keep pushing booze so that everybody got drunk. And lastly, let me just say that ridicule is a much underutilized tactic in fighting back against limbic capitalism. Some of the most effective public health campaigns have been those that have held up people like tobacco executives to ridicule. And ridicule is especially effective, I think, for young people. And I think that's something that we can develop more than we have.
That's, well, both those things are fascinating because on one hand, I mean, I could see Bernie Sanders coming out tomorrow and saying that we need to nationalize the production of some classes of medications like opioids. I mean, it's hard to argue that it is safe for society to allow capitalists to be responsible for the production of these drugs. They just literally killed hundreds of thousands of Americans and immiserated maybe millions because of their pursuit of profits. And I should say, just for the sake of fairness, that I think one of the Sacklers, complained that it was difficult on their kids to go to school because of all the negative publicity for them. But
yeah, and are you thinking of the David Sackler interview in Vanity Fair?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, I mean, the reason maybe you hear some hesitation in my voice is that you do get innovation. I mean, look at another example, smartphones. So you and I have been talking about the potential abuses or dangers, especially for young people, of being obsessed with your smartphone. On the other hand, the smartphone is a really great piece of technology which helps people navigate from place to place, which makes it easier to make 911 calls. I mean, there are lots of benefits that are associated with this technology. And I guess somebody who was defending free enterprise would say, well, did it take an Apple to develop this technology? Would this have necessarily come out of a nationalized telecommunications industry? That's a fair question to ask. And that's another reason why I use the phrase liberating enslaving pleasures in the book, is because I don't want it to come across as just entirely one-sided or puritanical, because I recognize that these same products and services that can cause so much mischief and so much misery and even death can also be liberating and life-saving in other circumstances.
Well, it's a fascinating book, and I think we can. I'm happy to come to an agreement that maybe what we need is just on a case-by-case basis decide what we're going to nationalize.
That's right. That's a good insight. That when we talk about limbic capitalism, we're actually talking about a whole range of industries, and I really believe that some of these products are intrinsically more dangerous than others. Which, by the way, is why the government in the Controlled Substances Act says, okay, we've got Schedule 1 drugs, which are forbidden, and we've got Schedule 2 and 3, which are tightly regulated, and Schedule 4 and 5, which are less tightly regulated. I mean, that's nothing if not an acknowledgement of what you just said, is that some drugs are more dangerous than others.
David Courtwright, the book is The Age of Addiction, How Bad Habits Became Big Business. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Sam, I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. That's it for us. We will head into the fun half where we will look upon, I think we'll probably end up discussing this intra-Democrats fight that is taking place here and this sort of almost the bizarre nature of it, and how Donald Trump has perhaps maybe given both sides an out here, although I suspect it won't work that way. But we've got a lot to talk about in that accord, and then we'll see Lindsey Graham try and justify. I don't know. It's pretty stunning. All of what's going on now, it's pretty stunning. None of it, and I don't know that this is a coincidence. None of it is really dealing with, or I should say, all of it is a distraction. And I'm not saying it's conceived in that way, but maybe it is, from the idea that Donald Trump seems to have absolutely no accountability in the context of, I mean, just the other day, he lost another cabinet secretary, albeit to a story of pedophilia and sex trafficking, as opposed to two of his campaign chairs, statewide campaign chairs, who had to sit down for direct pedophilia that I think was ongoing. And, I mean, it's quite possible that we'll be very close to him just having 2 or 3 actual members of his cabinet, as opposed to acting members. And you have things like the EPA rolling back, stuff like this during the Bush years. I don't know. We would end up talking about more because there was less of a distraction. Less people were paying attention. Maybe it's the exact same amount of people who are paying attention to questions like this. But the EPA is preparing to weaken rules that have, for over the past 30 some odd years, so early in the EPA's existence, which you'll recall first came into existence in, 72, 73 under Nixon. It would eliminate the ability of individuals or communities to appeal against EPA-issued pollution permits before a panel of agency judges. However, the permit holders, the industry, like literally the polluters, could still appeal to the panel. So the panel would exist only for one type of appeal, when corporations lose. So you'd have an opportunity to appeal if you want to increase pollution, but you will not have an opportunity to appeal to an EPA decision if it's to decrease pollution. I mean, that's pretty stunning. There's apparently, just in going over some of the changes In June, there was an announcement of a new EPA rule that would weaken regulations on greenhouse pollution from power plant smokestacks. In late summer, there's expected to be an announcement of a similar plan to weaken rules on vehicle tailpipe pollution. And, of course, that 2018 proposal to open much of the United States coastline to oil drilling. You know, you hear Donald Trump and his chums talk about the clean water and the clean air that we have. Because apparently some of his pollsters have said this is a problem with Republicans in the Republican women in the suburbs are a little concerned that you're rolling back EPA regulations at a time where we are headed towards barreling down upon a climate disaster. And so they're just keep saying clean water and clean air over and over again. And then they'll let us cage the immigrants, I guess is the plan. But we will touch on some of these things, I guess, in the fun half. Because that's fun. I think I'm in a cranky mood today.
That's fair.
Yeah. Anyways, it's your support that makes this show possible, folks. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. Jointhemajorityreport.com. Just pennies a day. Well, nickels a day. A handful of nickels a day. And we give you extra content every day. Occasionally, we give you a special bonus. But, I mean, we give you a bonus every day, like 90 minutes plus. You get it commercial free. Also, don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. And check out the AM Quickie. It's in your feed. It's not going to be there forever. See if you like it. If you got any comments, send us an email, majorityreporters@gmail.com. Michael is out today, but I imagine he'll be back tomorrow. Some type of mystery thing that's going on with him. Always happens to be on Mondays.
Mystery Mondays.
Yeah, Mystery Mondays. We need to get like a maybe a counter or some type of graph. I wonder if we can color code this. It's gone on Mondays. Like do one of those things where you built like whatever those the reverse of those like chocolate calendars counting down to Christmas. Like see if what we could build with like little dots indicating on Mondays, like some type of building or something like that. I don't know.
Once again, I'm very torn between my desire to talk shit on Michael and my desire to never side with the boss against a fellow employee.
It's tough. It's a very tough dilemma. It's a very tough dilemma. But Jamie's here. Jamie?
Here I am.
What's up? What's the latest with the Intifada?
Oh, well, we recorded an episode at an undisclosed location wherein we talked to a few different, very interesting communist thinkers about, let's see. The first one was actually about the song Old Town Road. We interviewed Joshua Clover and had an interesting conversation about that. Oh, it was all authors of articles in this issue of Commune Magazine, which is a really great magazine that we really encourage everyone to check out, and they're good friends of ours, and we've been doing a lot of stuff together. So we talked to Joshua Clover about Old Town Road. We talked to Michelle O'Brien about family abolition, and we spoke to, God, my brain is gone, Chloe Watlington, one of the editors from Commune Magazine, about her editor's note in the latest issue, which I found to be really powerful, and the human reasons behind why we're all doing this.
Matt?
Yeah, my most recent episode on Rutger Bregman and his book on UBI and open borders is out. And also on the YouTube page, just put the episode on Margaret Fuller, who's wrote Woman in the 19th Century. She's an early American feminist you should know about.
All right, folks. Going to take a quick break. Head into the fun half. 646-257-3920. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. you're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey Sam, hey Andy, you guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
yeah, no kidding. My daughter has sold something on Depop, and I've hooked up my PayPal to it. So she always demands the money. She's like calling me, and I'm like, dude, I'm doing a show. God. She's figured out a great business model. Have dad buy pants, sell them, pocket the money.
Smart.
Yeah, it is smart. I like at first I was like, oh, she's learning about business, but she's not learning about business. She's not learning about anything except for just how to fleece her dad.
That's a big part of American business.
That's probably is. Well, Dad, first I fleece you, and then I just go on to do other people I don't know. That's business.
I mean, it pretty much is.
It is.
I mean, we just talked about it.
Exactly. We did.
And it's very exciting.
Oh, God. Netroots Nation was interesting. I didn't get out of... I basically sat in a seat for like 10 hours each day, and then went out and had drinks and dinner with people that I hadn't seen in a long time or that I have seen, and that was fun. And then I had to leave early Saturday, unfortunately, so I missed sort of some of the headliners there. We'll go through that in a minute. But first, I just want to... here is AOC, and I don't know. I don't know what there is to say about the attack on her that I didn't... and the so-called squad. We didn't talk about during the interviews on Thursday and Friday. I mean, I think to a large extent, people seem largely really confused as to why Pelosi would go this hard. I mean, it's understandable on some level if you are jaded towards politicians and skeptical of them broadly and, even some skepticism of Pelosi. But at one point, it becomes hard to understand the logic even from her perspective. And that's the part that I find fun. I mean, I know why people do bad things and stupid things. But there is also, I want to say that it was on Crooked Timber, but I'm not sure. A writer, maybe it was Jonathan Schwartz, who, Tiny Revolution, maybe, I'm not sure, who had some type of iron law of institutions, which is that people would rather maintain their power within an institution even more than maintaining the power of the institution in and of itself. And that is not unique to Congress. That is not unique to anything. It's just institutions, groups. And it's quite conceivable that Nancy Pelosi, despite the fact that, the Seth Moultons of the caucus came at her and tried to run against her, they were quite easily dispatched. I think, and rightly so, Nancy Pelosi and many of her ilk see this generation, this younger generation of Congresspeople represented, if not directly, but illustrated by AOC and Tlaib and Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Pressley and others who are, sort of like adjacent, but particularly those younger women of color are the future of the Democratic Party. In many respects, electorally, they're the present of the Democratic Party, and maybe that's why, in terms of leadership, these folks are the future. And I think it threatens Pelosi and her ilk, and at least in the context of this era, it definitely feels like Pelosi is not up to the differences of this era. They're just not aware of what's going on with their voters. It's just simply can't understand what they hope to gain of this. I understand the idea of like they're hoping to run out the clock. They're afraid of impeachment because it puts them on. But this is going just a little bit further than that. And I don't see how this is effective. I really don't. I mean, I know that there was an internal poll that supposedly showed that people in the industrial Midwest were not responding well to AOC and socialism, supposedly. But it is, and that may be the case, it may not be the case. But either way, even if I stipulate that that poll is accurate and it was delivered to us accurately, which I tend to be a little skeptical of, but even if I stipulate that, it still doesn't make any sense. Nancy Pelosi polls like crap in every single district in the entire country, and she has for a decade. And she certainly did going into the 2016 race. And that was exclusively about the House and the Senate. Exclusively about the House and the Senate. I mean, presumably, right? And Nancy Pelosi polled like garbage. And that did not implicate people voting. And she was the leader of the party. Now, it's true, Fox has done a great job in defining AOC. More Republicans are aware of her than Democrats. But the fact of the matter is that in 2020, the vote is going to be about Donald Trump. And the question is, Are you going to give your base any reason not to vote against Donald Trump? Like, not just to vote for somebody else, but I mean, like, literally, are you going to give your base any reason to stay at home? Or are you going to make it a clear sort of choice that they're making? And that is to go out and vote against Donald Trump and not have any misgivings. Are you going to have an activated base? And activated people who stayed at home during 2016? I mean, that's really the question. We know that Trump's people came out as much as they were ever going to come out. They did not come out in 2018. Some Republicans had, I think, one of their best turnouts in a midterm as well. It's just Democrats went even further. And they did not... Like, this is what it's going to come down to. How many people get to the polls, particularly in these states? And so it doesn't matter what somebody in Michigan thinks of AOC. It doesn't matter in terms of them not liking her, because the jump from there to I'm going to vote for Trump, where I otherwise wouldn't, is just very hard to understand. But it does if you want in Milwaukee more African-American turnout, if you want more African-American people of color turnout in Michigan, you best not crap on the people who are representing the interests of those people, who are speaking out on behalf of those people. Because then you start to wonder, if you're one of those people, it would be irrational otherwise. So, like, is this a party that's really in my interests, or even has the potential to be in my interests? Because anytime we get some voice in there that we appreciate, they get sidelined and attacked. More so than the people who even went after Nancy Pelosi. Remember, AOC voted for her. So I don't know. It's mystifying, and of course Donald Trump stepped in it, and we will talk about that in a moment.
Well, I think it's exactly what you said. She's more invested in preserving her power within the institution, and representing the interests that currently dominate the institution than the success of the institution itself. But I do wonder, like, if you compare what's happening in the Democratic Party right now with the progressive wing, the squad or whatever, to when the Tea Party took over the Republicans, AOC is playing it very differently by demanding to be included in this institution, right? Whereas I think the Tea Party was more openly oppositional to the Republican establishment. And I wonder if that's a good move.
I mean, I don't know. AOC may have been doing that, but she's doing that as a sitting congresswoman. I mean, Justice Democrats are, I don't know if they're going after all the blue dogs, but they are going out and they are primarying. Democrats. And that's, theoretically what the Tea Party did. I mean, the strategies aren't going to align because the dynamics are very different and the voters are different. The institutional support in terms of money. I mean, the Tea Party, thousands of buses showed up to bring them to rallies, and it was all paid for by the Koch brothers. There's just no equivalent, and so it's a different calculation. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham. Look at Lindsey Graham. Like these are our politicians who have a different relationship with their base. And I don't know that the Democrats are ever going to have that because they're a much more diverse party, frankly. They just simply are. I mean, sheer numbers. And so there's too many, I think, different sort of like planes that intersect to make the Democratic Party, planes and groups of people, as opposed to Republicans, which starts off with, I guess, the advantage that they're 100% white.
Yeah, but don't you think one strength of the kinds of politics that these people represent is that it is more of a mass working class politics that can bring together diverse segments of the population?
That who represents?
AOC, Rashida Tlaib.
That they can bring diverse groups of people. Yes, no, I do think that's one of their strengths. But I'm just saying that the strategies are not going to align. The strategies of insurgents in the Democratic Party are not going to necessarily align with the strategies of insurgents in the Republican Party, because in many respects, the Tea Party, or whatever you want to call it, didn't have to take over the apparatus of the Republican Party, because the Koch brothers came in and they created one that was better. Like, they literally, remember those stories of the voter files? People weren't going to the party anymore for the voter files because the Koch brothers had developed a better voter file. Now, I don't know who's going to step in. Tom Steyer's not going to say, like, hey, guys, I'm going to give $100 million to the Justice Democrats, and they're going to create a voter file, and it's going to be better. And so it doesn't matter where you go to these guys. I mean, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. I guess it just seems kind of weird to me that you would come in, throw a bunch of bombs, primary Democrats, and represent policies that the centrist wing of the party hates and finds extremely threatening, and then act surprised that they are responding to you with hostility.
Who's acting surprised?
I mean, the way that AOC has been talking about this stuff, the way that the squad has been talking about it, it seems like they expect their policies and their actions to be more welcome than they actually are.
I mean,
I think this is just the fight.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm not sure that...
Is it a rhetorical stance that they're taking?
I would imagine some of that is. I mean, some of it is, I would imagine, is a rhetorical stance. I mean, it helps. You're trying to sort of like marshal your own forces, and so you make it look like you got cold cocked. But, we don't know what the relationship has been between them and Pelosi. We don't know that from looking in the outside. It could have been better or worse at different points. But, I mean, if I'm Nancy Pelosi and it's hard for me to put myself into her position. I don't have this power. I don't have the same relationship to wanting power, I think, that probably she does, which is why I'm not the Speaker of the House. But one could also imagine a scenario where we're going to co-opt the energy of these people and we're going to bring them into the tent and have them piss out instead of piss in.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like there was an act. That's the thing that I'm very surprised about, is that I'm not surprised that there's not animosity. I'm not surprised that people feel threatened by them. I'm just surprised by the way they're going about it, because it's not terribly effective. You can feel threatened by people and react in a way that's more constructive to your own agenda in the long run. I mean, it's not like Nancy Pelosi is going to live forever, right? Like, I mean, I don't know how many more years she plans to be Speaker of the House, but
I think it's I don't know if it's that strategic. Like the way like Drew Hamill, Nancy Pelosi's chief of staff, and the other guy for Hakeem Jeffries tweeted this stuff out on Friday night. Like, it seems so petty. And not very strategic to me. Like, these are just small-minded, like, apparatchiks, like grasping on power.
Oh yeah, they're absolutely letting their hubris get in the way. Like, the smart thing to do would be to deny them the attention and deny them the news stories, because that's what they're running on, and that's how they're building a base, right? You could just say, oh, it's not a big deal, I'm not going to comment, we're working it out, instead of, being this much of a see you next Tuesday.
And geez. All right, well, here is AOC. After having toured these facilities, these border concentration camps in June, and she is at the House Department of Homeland Security hearings. Is that what it is? And I think she's there testifying, not necessarily a member of the committee, because they had been on the trip, and here she is.
Much has been made about the fact that we have said that this is a manufactured crisis. And in many ways, it is manufactured in that it is wholly unnecessary. It is unnecessary to separate children from their families. It is unnecessary to have a policy to detain innocent women and families that have harmed no person and are legally seeking asylum in the United States of America. It is unnecessary to have a policy that calls children unaccompanied when they arrive with older brothers, sisters, and grandparents and treat them no differently than human traffickers. And in speaking of trafficking, it is completely unnecessary for this administration to choose to implement policies like metering and so-called remain in Mexico policies that dump innocent people in dangerous territories that puts them right in the crosshairs of human traffickers, ripe for picking. This is a manufactured crisis because the cruelty is manufactured. This is a manufactured crisis because there is no need for us to do this. When we took our tour of the border, one of the first things that we were told was that we were not allowed to speak to the migrants, that we were not allowed to have contact with them, that we shouldn't. And this was given for reasons of, quote, their safety or for the expediency of the tour. We went in and one of the officers attempted to sneak a photograph of myself and other congressional members. And at that point, we asked to enter one of the cells. We were allowed to speak to the women, and these are the women that we spoke to. It's their handwriting. And while we are being asked to speak only to officers, we are not getting the accounts of migrants, of their treatment, of what they are experiencing. And so when these women tell me that they were put into a cell and that their sink was not working, and we tested the sink ourselves and the sink was not working, and they were told to drink out of a toilet bowl, I believed them. I believed these women. I believed the canker sores that I saw in their mouths because they were only allowed to be fed unnutritious food. I believed them when they said they were sleeping on concrete floors for 2 months. I believed them. And what was worse about this, Mr. Chairman, was the fact that there were American flags hanging all over these facilities, that children were being separated from their parents in front of an American flag, that women were being called these names under an American flag.
It's stunning to watch these videos and to hear these stories and to know that this is official policy and that half the country, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, at least, does not care. Certainly a significant percentage of the country has figured out a way to say this is the right thing. We're doing the right thing here. Like, I mean, are there vast swaths of people who can actually point to a single thing that has materially, that immigrants have materially impacted their lives for the worse? A single thing. And you're willing to put people in cages for what? It's just insane. It's insanity. It really is insanity. And, like I said earlier, like, I don't know how to articulate this without it sounding like, sort of like at arm's length. But I just wonder, like, at what point do we cross a threshold where we see images or become aware of what's going on? Because, and I mean, I feel like I said this like a year ago, but this is not the Holocaust. But if you were going to do another mass extinction, or I should say extermination of people, this is one of the ways that you would go about doing it. This would be one of the early steps. Now, there's a lot of different branches you can head off from this point. But you certainly can't get to there without going through what we're going through now.
Yeah. The concentration camps didn't start explicitly as death camps.
No. And I don't know. I mean, like, what, at what point, just step back and think about where we have gone from here. We knew that there were these facilities. Jeff Merkley was outside of one of them, wasn't allowed to go in, then got in, got a little peek, maybe. Well, what's the big deal? Oh, they're in cages. That's horrible. But then what's the big deal? Oh, there are people dying in there, but not many. Oh, they're in cages and they're not being fed very well, or they're covered with lice, or they're not allowed to shower. But what's the big deal? They have to drink out of some toilets. Well, now it's not their fault because, they weren't designed for these things. At what point? One of the things that, as a kid going to Hebrew school, all of it was about, not all of it, but when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, we were only 30 years out. 30 years out from the Holocaust. We are more than 30 years out from when I was 7 or 8 and 9 and 10, I can tell you that. And we spent a lot of time as kids, probably more than we probably should have, frankly. But I think there was an awareness that, these concentration camp survivors, some of them were our Hebrew teachers, are going to die off. And there's not going to be any firsthand recollection. And so you better make sure that next generation has an awareness of it. Obviously, different people took different things from that understanding of that generation that went through it. But I just remember, the questions everybody had was like, how do people around there let this happen? How did people, whether they were in Germany or whether they were in Poland or other countries around there, they knew the camps were there. How did they sort of pretend like they didn't know what was going on? How did they allow that to happen in the run-up? Now, obviously, it's not completely analogous. But there's this weird dynamic where you start to see these pictures that come out of there. And I don't think that we have that we're in a country that is going to begin to exterminate people like this. But at what point do we say, oh, you know what? The systemic killing of people that we have rounded up is not the threshold where we engage. We're supposed to be a country that is, whatever, American exceptionalism. Where is the threshold where we engage? What would it be? What if people are kept in there for 50 days, 100 days, 200 days? What's the date? What's the date where we say, hey, there's something that is so wrong that we need to break the law to stop it? How many people have to die? How many kids have to be separated? What are the illnesses that need to go on there? It's not enough chicken pox. It's not enough lice infestations. What is the threshold where it's... it
should have happened already.
I don't know.
For most people.
I really don't know. But I don't know what, what's the threshold of, to action or whatnot. I don't know what it is. I really don't. But there's this sort of creepy ass feeling that when you start to see these images, you see Mike Pence go and just look over the pen as to, here are the specimens we've assembled in this cage. And what happens when one of them gets a little bit rowdy? Oh, the guy on the platform pulls them out. We pull them out. I don't know where they send them. Where do they put them? Where do they put those people? They've got 380, I think, in that pen. 380, he said, in another pen. What's the extra space where they put the rowdy ones? Where do they put the rowdy ones when they pull them out?
They have been using solitary confinement on a lot of people.
They're not appreciative. We're giving you a cement floor to sleep on.
The only way you can get out of that cage full of people and your cement floor with the aluminum or tinfoil blanket is to be rowdy.
Yeah, and I wonder where that gets you. I mean, what is supposed to separate us as what is the unique element of our country? I mean, it's, I don't know.
I also really want to make the point that the images we're seeing right now are incredibly shocking, and I'm glad that a lot of people are waking up to it for the first time. But this has been building for a long time, right? The infrastructure for a lot of this stuff was laid during the Clinton administration. It was continued under Obama, and it is certainly accelerating. But the best way to get involved, because everyone wants to know how they can get involved, and there are definitely ways, the best way to get involved is to get involved in long-term immigrant justice organizing. And there are people who've been doing this work for a very long time and welcoming the increased attention. And I think that everyone else needs to follow their lead. And I think a lot of people are going to be looking to the left for answers now. And it seems like a good chance to draw out the connections in a very explicit way between the tech sector, capitalist accumulation, militarized borders, and state violence against human beings.
Besides race is RAICES, do you have any other groups you want to plug?
I got to look back at the thread, but certainly my friends in the DSA Immigrant Justice Working Group have been doing some really admirable work. I'm about to raise some funds for El Otro Lado, I believe, which is a organization that helps migrants in Tijuana. And I'm going to post a whole lot more really soon.
Yeah, and follow Ronald Reagan. I'm sure he's posting some of those organizations as well.
Yeah, the Redirect podcast. Actually, they go into the how this was a slow sort of accumulating mess of infrastructure for, terrorizing immigrants.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 707 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam.
Yes.
Hey, Sam, it's Joe from California.
Jeff from California. What's on your mind?
Joe.
Joe from California. What is on your mind?
So, thank you. Long-time listener, big fan, first-time caller. So I have a little bit of a problem on my hands. Last year, I spent Christmas with my little brother, and very quickly managed to convince him that Bernie Sanders was the best option for 2020. And recently, sorry, I'm a little nervous. Recently, we're trying to convert my other brother.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is he works for charter schools in Brooklyn. And so he's really, up to the teeth in the establishment BS. And so what I'm asking you is, how would you approach someone who has a brain and is a very smart person, but has kind of gone the other way?
Who does your brother support? Just give me a sense of how far gone he is.
Okay, so I mean, obviously he supported Hillary in 2016, and the last time I talked to my little brother was after the debate, and he said, and I asked him, did he say anything about Bernie? And my little brother said that he, quote, said, Bernie is just a mess.
Well, but who does he support?
Who
does he support? Do you know?
No, I don't. I think he supports Kamala pretty strongly.
Well, he's not at Biden levels of problem.
I don't think so. He's a little too woke for that.
I mean, I don't know what you say to someone like that. I think that ilk of folk is not necessarily going to be how Bernie wins if he wins the primary. Frankly, I'd be more concerned if he was a Biden supporter. I mean, on some level, strategically speaking, maybe him being a Kamala supporter is good. Maybe you just say, like, what about Booker? You should think about Booker. Booker really loves edgy. All I'm saying is, like, you got two choices. You can try and convert him to Bernie, or maybe you could take him off the board a little bit. And so maybe you should turn him on to Cory Booker.
Take him off the board.
Yeah.
To just try to like sideline him into some other losing candidate.
That's what I'm suggesting. Yes. Like say to him like, whoa.
Julian Castro.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
You know who really was great with charter schools? Cory Booker. Boy. You should really look into him. Because I don't know about Kamala.
Can I ask you a question? Is he like a teacher or more of a boss or administrator?
So he started out as a teacher, and I should say that my little brother's gay, and I helped start the GSA at my high school, and so we don't agree on anything except for the fact that we both are socially liberal. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like I'm a stand-up comedian, and he doesn't like my jokes because he thinks that they're not woke enough. But he used to be a teacher, and now he's an administrator. So now he is like a recruiter.
His class position might make this a little more difficult. I was going to say.
That's why I'm calling you.
Yeah, I got to say, take him off the board. Push him into Booker's camp.
I think I'm with Sam on this.
So can I say one thing that you've actually sort of inspired me in a way that you've given me a new strategy, which is fuck the primary, like you said, take him off the board in the primary, and then hopefully I can.
Yeah, I mean, listen,
general.
You're going to have a much better argument with him, Trump versus Bernie, than you will trying to peel him off. So I would just say take him off the board. Take him off the board.
For now.
All right, Sam. All right, Sam. I'll call in again. Thanks for taking my call. It's been good talking to you.
All right, you too. There you go.
Also, anybody, as Brendan points out behind us, anybody who is in New York, it doesn't matter if they don't vote for Bernie over Trump. Bernie's going to win New York.
Right, in New York. Right. You're looking to the general election. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 267 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, I'm calling about a medical bill I just received. I had a claim that was denied, unfortunately. And the plan I have is called Reuben Care, and it was denied for reasons of I'm only interested in ID.
Oh, what happened? He also obviously has gotten one of those Reuben phones too. It just stops talking to you.
You know any better?
There was an idea overload.
You back? Sorry.
Can you hear me now better?
Yeah.
Okay, I go through a dead zone there as I escape my wage slavery. Anyway, the thing I wanted to ask about...
Hey, who is this?
This is Fran from Philadelphia. Sorry.
Fran from Philadelphia. All right, Fran.
Hey.
We kept your sign. Did you see that? We ended up using it, the left is best, as our... we realized when we got down there, I said to Brenda, I got to get a Majority Report a banner just to identify the table as people are walking by. And then we just ended up just using your left is best sign and putting a sticker.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Well, I appreciate it.
It was great seeing you, Sam. Look, the camera really does add 10 pounds because you are a slender fox, if I do say so myself.
Oh, well, thank you.
Anyway,
I appreciate that.
For anyone on Bumble there, he's a looker.
There you go, folks.
The thing I wanted to ask about is
try to. It's basically about Buttigieg.
Do I look heavy on camera? No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
was Pete Buttigieg's national service plan, and in the context of something like a connection that I kind of see coming from Fred Jameson about the connection between universal conscription, or you could even dumb it down to the word of like national service, and a Green New Deal, jobs guarantee, refugee crisis, and currently the border crisis. So the sort of the idea that I had building on Jameson was, if you have a jobs guarantee, if you need a jobs guarantee and you need to deal with upcoming, massive displacement issues around the world and certainly locally, then I feel like a core you could create with the pithy idea I had was call it ARC, the Aid and Relief Corps, in which you just capitalize on the kind of hero culture that we already have in this country and actually turn it into something good. And instead of, the American heroes defending freedom, basically murdering people, how about, having massive ships, repurposing our aircraft carriers to be, essentially refugee escape vehicles, and you could do this, locally in the United States, just what the National Guard already does to some extent, of, helping people in environmental crises. And, but then that would be a job, that would be in the jobs guarantee. That should be part of the Green New Deal, is this Aid and Relief Corps, because, now we have this border crisis, and you made this great comment about, are standards going to shift again where we're okay with, these concentration camps becoming death camps? Because that really is just numerically, that has to be coming down the pike if nothing changes, because there will just be too many people trying to escape environmental crises or starvation. There will just be, there'll be nowhere to put them if you don't have a better solution than these camps. Can we have the Aid and Relief Corps or a different jobs guarantee corps build cities, build towns for these people to live in that wouldn't just be reservations? I mean that would have to change the way we think about immigration. But anyway.
Well, I think the idea of what you're talking about is a good idea. I don't know that it, frankly, the numbers that we're talking about, we have dealt with the numbers of immigrants on the southern border before. We've certainly, have been able to absorb this many of people, and we certainly have the ability to go and put them on, probation and have them come back to court. But I think the idea of of some type of WPA is what you're really talking about.
Right.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, why not? Why not? It worked quite well before. Yeah. And so, but Fran, I appreciate the call. I think it's a good idea. And again, thank you for the sign. I think a lot of people were mystified, but it gave us a time to remind people what left is best.
Let me leave you with an anecdote.
Yeah.
An anecdote of what it wasn't the 0 Hour podcast. It was the one who was one further to the right of you. They were like, as I was sort of photobombing, they were like, okay, what is this creepy guy doing? What left is best? What does that mean? And I was like, what is that? And I said, well, it's the truth. I don't know what else you want me to say. and they're like, but like, what is it? Does it mean something? And I'm like, well, just the left is best. There's nothing else. And one of the guys at the table goes, well, I don't know, waffles are pretty good. Anyway, that was the level of the other podcasts you were on
absolutely.
That page.
We're promoting the left. They're promoting waffles. Thank you, Fran.
All right.
Appreciate it.
All right, love you all. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Just a reminder, the whole left is best meme on this show came from shortly after Trump got elected, there was a fake vandalism scandal in Connecticut, I think it was, right? It was like, I can't remember what town it was.
In my hometown,
Was it West Hartford? Where supposedly some anarchist Antifa people targeted a playground, and one of the things that they wrote on the playground to show that they marked their territory is "Left is best," which of course
the famed Antifa slogan "Left is best."
Left is best, of course. Where it's, I mean, can you imagine these guys just sitting around going like, "What are we going to do to make it look like they were anarchic?" Oh, I know. They say left is number one. No, that doesn't sound right.
Did you see a guy set himself on fire trying to burn down a synagogue recently?
No.
Oh yeah, I'll see if I can find that story. There's a security camera footage of him trying to set it.
Oh, and he accidentally set himself on fire.
Yeah, he accidentally set himself on fire.
Similar kind of self-own. Is that what you're saying?
Left is best. That sounds like something they would write. This is breaking. A judge has sentenced James Alex Fields Jr. He is the guy who rammed his car into protesters in Charlottesville, killing Heather Heyer. He has been given prison plus 419 years. Life in prison. Life in prison and plus 419 years for murder of Heather Heyer and malicious wounding of others in Charlottesville. Wow.
I don't know how to feel about that.
I don't either, to be honest with you. That seems like a long time, and probably, I don't know. I just don't know that there is value in basically, essentially, telling someone that you're going to die in prison. But
no, like, I don't believe in that for anyone,
right?
Even for horrible murderers.
Well, for instance, like Breivik, Anders Breivik, the guy who killed all the kids in Norway and set the bomb off. Norway doesn't have life sentences; they have like 30-year sentences, and after every 30 years, you have to reassess it. And I think something like that's fairly doable
as a starting point, frankly. All right, let's turn to in the wake of reporting on the sentence that white supremacist who ran his car into protesters in Charlottesville, killing Heather Heyer and wounding others. Let's talk about the president, who is really, with, of course, his handmaidens in the Republican Party, been normalizing racism. And social scientists will tell you that whatever people's racist ideas are, they can occupy a larger part of the way that they filter things in the world. And when figures in society begin to normalize these things, and they say, basically tell other people it's okay, then people on the outer margins of these things become even bolder and act upon these things. And it's not just the president normalizing it. It's the Republican Party normalizing it. When you don't have, I don't know, more than 1, 2 Republican lawmakers coming out and criticizing Donald Trump for tweeting that these women of color who are freshman Congress people should go back to their countries. As you know, Ilhan Omar was a Somali refugee. Basically, I mean, her story is basically the story that Americans tell themselves as what America is. And Donald Trump has basically came out and said, go home to where you belong. If you want an example of how something like that can be normalized, like normalized, just not even made normal, like almost like, hey, this is a benefit. This is cheeky. Here is Fox and Friends. Listen to how they talk about this. It is, again, when you talk about, like, you know, and note that all of this stuff basically came out of the trip that the squad made down to these detention centers. This is what has brought a lot of this to the fore. This is what has raised the emotions of people and seeing Nancy Pelosi's inactivity.
Or left-wing base there, and essentially what these newly elected congressmen and women, oftentimes women in these cases, are coming out and saying, listen, we were elected to buck the system. We were elected to step in and shake up the establishment because they feel that Democrats have not been fulfilling a progressive enough agenda, and they feel that voters want to hear from them. Mm-hmm. So they are standing firm, and I think that Nancy Pelosi is going to have a hard time contending with a lot of these women who are very, very strong. They're very, very principled, and they are not backing down.
Without a doubt, you know, we're not the only ones to notice. President Trump tweeting this morning this. So interesting to see progressive Democrat congresswomen who originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe, the worst, most corrupt and inept anywhere in the world, if they even have a functioning government at all, now loudly and viciously telling the people of the United States, the greatest and most powerful nation on earth, how our government is to be run. Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came, then come back and show us how it is done. These places need your help badly. You can't leave fast enough. I'm sure that Nancy Pelosi would be very happy to quickly work out free travel arrangements. This tweet that you're just seeing now is clearly going to get, I think, a lot of discussion.
Someone's feeling very comedic today.
One thing I call
okay, first off, look, you can hear them forcing chuckles during the last reading of that. Both, I don't know, the stooge in the middle and the stooge on the right, and they both had the exact same reaction. Isn't that strange? Someone feel a little comedic, and someone says the comedian in chief almost simultaneously, as if like this is the way that we're going to deal with this. We got to put this news up. I mean, because everybody's talking about it. How do we say? Oh, he's joking. He's being jocular. Does that sound familiar to you? If you ever heard Rush Limbaugh when he was challenged, like, you called Sandra Fluck a slut for going up in front of Congress and saying that we should have health insurance that provides birth control for people. I was joking. Can't you take a joke? Gavin McInnes, I was joking. Can't you take a joke? All of these alt-right guys, I'm joking. Snowflakes. You can't take a joke.
What, do you want to censor me?
I'm being comedic. This is what's wrong with the left. They're not funny anymore. This is how, I don't think that these people all get in a room and say, hey, how can we mainstream increased hostility towards brown people? How can we do that? But I'll tell you what, if they did, I think what happens is Trump has a certain mentality. He reacts, and then these sycophants try and make it go down in the smoothest way possible. But if they did get into a room and try and plan it out, I got news for you. It would look exactly like this. They don't. This is just ad hoc because this is not brain surgery. Oh, he basically just used the greatest sort of racist meme you could against people whose job it is as Congress people to tell the government what to do. They are the government. That's the system that we have here. And you tell them to go back home. They would not be Congress people if this was not their home. He's joking. There's a point. He's trying to make a point, but it's a joke.
Yeah, do they think that he wouldn't deport them if he could figure out how to do it?
Oh, my God. Well, they would be going it's funny. He said, have a nice trip. Come on. That's a funny way to deport people.
The Instagram group, the hashtag squad goals and all that. It seems like a number of the things that they say are those memes that you see on Instagram, these somewhat like defiant and inspirational memes. This is real life. This isn't social media just having fun, trying to, rile people up. This is real life. The words you say have real life consequences.
Pause it. I will remind you, he is saying this 10 seconds after just saying that Donald Trump was told these women to go home to their home countries, 3 of whom born in the United States, incidentally, that it's a joke. I mean, this is stunning.
And I think that needs to be taken into consideration.
I think President Trump is making an important point because he's trying to say that the values that built this country, everything from, securing the border and being a nation of laws to, freedom of speech on college campuses, whatever issue you're talking about, a lot of times these are the very issues that the left is trying to obstruct. And he's drawing attention to that and saying, if you don't like what this country stands for, you're not going to change it and take away all these things that Americans value so much. Like
freedom of speech on college campuses is what this country's built on.
The word border does not appear in the Constitution also, by the way.
Strengthen borders, freedom of speech on college campuses. The major principles the country's built on.
Like, if you don't like it, leave and go set up camp somewhere else, but you're not going to destroy what we have fought so hard and so long to value.
That's a good point.
We're going to turn to your headlines now.
No, it's not.
Oh, my God. That was... Right? Jesus. What? We know what the list. You don't even have to. The list is strengthen the borders, freedom of speech on college campuses. There was one more.
Because he's trying to say that the values that built this country, everything from, securing the border and being a nation of laws to, freedom of speech on college campuses, whatever issue you're talking about.
Being a nation of laws.
Wow.
That's what makes America unique. We're a nation of laws.
No laws in any other nation.
No, never. Right.
Do you think,
we're a nation of laws, except for when it comes to businesses who want to put crap in the environment or poison the water or cut some corners when they're making a medical device or, put some food products or quasi-food products in our kids' cereal. A nation of laws, except for those sniggly little ones that inhibit business.
Do you think we all missed the part in the Declaration of Independence where they talked about the SJWs on the college campuses?
I mean, I think there's no doubt in my mind that there's enough letters in the Declaration of Independence where if you knock a bunch out, you could actually create that sentence. Unbelievable. Here is Lindsey Graham. He is going out now to, I guess, further. This is what we played for you in terms of the Fox and Friends weekend was yesterday, Sunday. Here is today. This is the next step. We've got to run cover for President Trump. He's told these people to leave the country, these congresswomen. He's told them to leave the country. Ha, ha, ha. But words have consequences when they're said on Instagram, not so much on Twitter. According to Fox and Friends. Well, here is Lindsey Graham running to Fox. Again, trying to sort of make it seem like, well, I don't know if Trump's tweet was racist, but these women deserved it.
We all know that AOC and this crowd are a bunch of communists. They hate Israel. They hate our own country. They're calling the guards along our border, the Border Patrol agents, concentration camp guards. They accuse people who support Israel of doing it for the Benjamins. They're anti-Semitic. They're anti-America. Don't get down. Aim higher. We don't need to know anything about them personally. Talk about their policy.
Oh, there he is. He's defending them now, right? They're communists. They're anti-Semites. They hate this country. But don't call them like
those things that I just called them.
Don't get immigrant on them. Don't do that.
He had that strong Brett Kavanaugh hearing energy there.
Yep.
Yeah, with a pinch of McCarthy.
Let me just say this. I wish John McCain was alive to see this. I don't know why that would give me such pleasure to look at the look on John McCain's face if he had to see Lindsey Graham. What a horrible, despicable human being. And I don't know, like, you know, this is a Republican Party, folks. This is it. This is it. And the people who are going to respond to that, I got news for you. There is nothing you're not going to sell them on anything else. I'm sorry. You're just simply not. That's just not going to happen. And fishing in those waters is like literally trying to fish with, I don't know, I mean, like a fly rod. You can spend 8 hours in the water and you can slap it and slap it, slap it, slap it. And maybe you'll hook one and you'll come home with one fish. But it is, if you need to get a net full of fish, that is not the place to do it.
Kind of makes me want to run for office to show them what a real America-hating communist looks like.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the other thing about this America-hating thing is when AOC breaks down in tears in front of that DHS committee about how you're doing all this stuff in front of the American flag. Like, there's a lot of people that might point out, you know, the types of things like this is what has always happened in front of that flag. At the same time, like, being someone who wants to redeem the actual promise, however mythological, like, I think AOC is doing exactly what should be celebrated by that crowd.
Yeah.
Of course.
We've got two different
And
strategies
I got news for
going.
you. They're not communists. They're not communists. And of course, that's always been on some level, I think, like, particularly in this day and age, just a surrogate for the word, they're not white. Like, that's what communist means. Today.
Like interracial marriage.
Not white.
It also shows that the word socialist doesn't work anymore. He has to go to communist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
We got to juice this baby.
Hell yeah. And by the way, like, I'm totally fine with people on the inside using one strategy and people on the outside using another. If AOC wants to get up in front of the flag and call them out on not living up to America's promise, that's great. At the same time, I'm going to be working on the outside to convince people that America is bad.
There you go. Watch out, Lindsey Graham. Of course, all of the grifters get in on the act at this point. You're Newt Gingrich. You know you're in the final chapter, and you're just happy to get on television. And if you got to get out there and say some crazy-ass things, then you'll do it. Here's Newt Gingrich on with the weekday Fox and Friends stooges, Brian Kilmeade, asking if Trump being racist was a good political move.
Quick, the president inserted himself in the middle of this intramural fight between the speaker and the squad. Was that a good political move?
Well, I think the president believes that the more he can get the country to look at the so-called squad, the more he can get them to realize how radical they are and how fundamentally anti-American their views are. In the long run, the better off he is. I think he would like to see them.
Pause it. Incidentally, as we suggested earlier when Lindsey Graham was calling them communists, when Newt Gingrich says, get the country to look at how radical they are and how fundamentally anti-American their views are, I got news for you. That's also a code for not white. How not white they are.
In the long run, the better off he is. I think he would like to see them as sort of the front page of the Democratic Party, and I think he thinks anything he does to elevate them is to his net advantage.
Is he right?
Oh, I think so, but.
Yeah, I got to think about that because I still may want to get a job. Yeah, I think so.
David Axelrod thinks he's right. He tweeted it. Says it's a tough strategy.
It is a tough strategy, but I don't think it's actually gonna work. To be honest with you, Trump did this too with Barack Obama. It didn't have the impact on Barack Obama. It was effective in terms of Hillary Clinton. Here's Axelrod. With the deliberate racist outburst, Donald Trump wants to raise the profile of his targets, drive Dems to defend them, and make them emblematic of the entire party. It's a cold, hard strategy, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily an effective one. And the question is, there's no doubt in my mind, they found that Nancy Pelosi as a target was ineffective in 2018 because when they say San Francisco politics now, that used to mean gay. She's gay. She's for the gays. And now that just does not have the same resonance because we've had marriage equality for what feels like a lifetime now. It's only been like 4 or 5 years. And guess what? These people living in Ohio, guess what's changed in their lives? Nothing. In Michigan, nothing. In Pennsylvania, nothing. I was just down there. You couldn't tell the difference between pre-marriage equality and post-marriage equality. Everything was just the same. And they have had a lot of mileage out of really, I mean, hundreds of years of examples of demonizing people of color as an effective political strategy. So the question is, and we already know that like 85% of Republican voters knew who AOC was. The question is, how does the Democratic Party respond to this? Like, just because it's Donald Trump's strategy to elevate 4 women of color who serve in Congress because it's going to activate the racism of his base does not mean that the strategy of Democrats should be like, we're not really affiliated with them. Like, we don't have the brown people cooties on us. Like that, I mean, that's what Nancy Pelosi ostensibly is trying to do to salvage the frontline Democrats. And I got news for you. Not going to work. Not going to work. That ship has sailed. After Barack Obama, if there was any chance, I don't know that there was any chance. I'm not even talking about morality here. I'm just talking about sheer hard strategy. You really only have one choice, which is to push further, to leverage them to drive out more people to vote. This is basically a war of attrition, folks. These sort of like sneaky measures that Nancy Pelosi can put the cork back in the bottle, put the genie back in the bottle. Because all you're going to do, if you're going to try and convince whatever tiny amount of people that are in this pool that are convincible that the Democratic Party is not the better of the two parties in representing these people. And look, the fact of the matter is, there's no equivalent in the Republican Party. There's no 4 women of color who are representing people in the Republican Congress, right? They don't exist. And so, as bad as the Democratic Party is, the association with these women is legit. If you want to suppress people of color in this country, you have one choice when it comes to an electoral strategy, and that is to vote for Republicans. And the idea that you can convince any of these people that, well, it's a tough call, Democrats or Republicans, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And so here you have Donald Trump basically saying that these people hate our country. He's going to demand an apology from the freshman congresswoman who clashed with Pelosi. Pelosi apparently is putting on the floor a vote to condemn Donald Trump, which is smart because you have one choice here now. Donald Trump has, I would argue, even before Donald Trump, all the social science shows it. We had that professor on who wrote that book, Identity Crisis. Up until Barack Obama, 50% of non-college educated white people still thought the Republican Party was to the left of the Democrats when it came to race. To the left of the Democrats when it came to race. Holding on to the vestiges of the Republican Party that their parents had probably told them from Lincoln, from, the Dixiecrats. And they didn't realize it until Barack Obama got elected. Well, they realize it now. So Donald Trump is going to play his strategy, and there's only one way to match this strategy. You double down. You think we're a party that supports brown people? I got news for you. You don't know how much we support brown people. You think that we're a party that is a vehicle for brown people? You don't know how much we're a vehicle for brown people. Because here's Donald Trump. He's going to double down. Here he is.
Well, I didn't mention names, and I didn't do that, but I will tell you, with our country, and I think everybody in this audience, these are great manufacturers, great workers in our audience, too. They brought a lot of their workers here. If you're not happy here, then you can leave. As far as I'm concerned, if you hate our country, if you're not happy here, you can leave. And that's what I say all the time. That's what I said in a tweet, which I guess some people think is controversial. A lot of people love it, by the way. A lot of people love it. But if you're not happy in the U.S., if you're complaining all the time, very simply, you can leave. You can leave right now. Come back if you want. Don't come back. It's okay, too. But if you're not happy, you can leave.
But these are American citizens. These are American citizens.
Well, that's just a very racist statement, somebody that would say that. So Speaker Pelosi said, "Make America white again."
She said that's what
Let me
you
tell
want.
That's a
White
very
nationalists are
racist. That's a
praising
very
your
racist
tweets,
statement.
sir.
I'm surprised she'd say that.
Why do you want to do that?
Wow.
Three of the congresswomen.
I mean, they're going all in with this shit now. They're going all in. Now, just a reminder, you remember his speech at the RNC, right? America's a hellscape. He's campaigning now, and they've shifted. He thinks he's going to do Reagan now.
If you don't like Trump's America, you can leave.
But here's the bottom line. They are static. This is the thing that, it's, the Donald Trump won with a smaller percentage than Mitt Romney. They are static. The Democrats, right now, the idea that they would alienate 4 people who could go and get those votes in Wisconsin and Michigan tomorrow. It's just stunning. They're just, the game of mitigation is just not going to work anymore.
Yeah, well, this is why it comes off so disingenuously when the Democrats try to position themselves as being good on race, right? Like, you can't give an inch to these people, especially not right now when all that's at stake is at stake. So I feel like people would trust them a little bit more if they didn't continue to distance themselves from these 4 women, if they didn't continue to beef up the militarized border. Like, all of these things put the lie to their pretensions to some sort of diversity project.
Well, I mean, look, the fact is that they are the Democrats. I mean, it puts the lie. I don't know what Nancy Pelosi has articulated that, but the reality is the Democrats are diverse. They are diverse. It's just that the leadership wants to distance themselves from the reality of the party. And that strategy is just not going to work anymore. I don't know that it ever worked, frankly, but it's not going to work anymore. It's just not going to work anymore.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's who I'm talking about when I talk about how Nancy Pelosi is happy to use these people in a photo op, happy to have superficial diversity, but
desperately needs their votes.
Yeah, but when it comes down to it, she's not willing to do anything for people of color in America.
It's a horrible strategy. It's just a horrible strategy. But again, I think it may go back to just wanting to maintain her power in this branch.
And then you get conservatives saying things like, well, both parties are racist, but at least the Republicans are honest about it.
Yeah, I don't know if they say that, but
I mean, it's disingenuous when they do, but they do say it.
Here is Ilhan Omar. She is at Netroots on Saturday. she is explaining this, her perspective on this internecine, is that what you would call it? Internecine fight amongst the Democrats, and what she feels people who perceive themselves as the insurgents of the Democrats need to do.
There's a constant, I think, struggle oftentimes with people who have power about sharing that power. And we are not really in the business of asking for the share of that power. We're in the business of trying to grab that power and return it to the people so that we can push for an agenda that frees young people from the shackles of student debt, that makes sure every single American has access to health care, that young kids in our country who had parents who had to make a really difficult choice to survive are not being caged at our borders, that we are not carrying the water for this cruel administration, that we are doing the job that the people sent to us when they put us in the majority, which is to resist and insist on policies that push this country forward. That's the work that we're doing.
Can you imagine how celebrated Ilhan Omar would be if she was just like talking about how we need school choice, and like if she just like sort of just towed the line? Like, do you have like any idea how celebrated she'd be? Like, she would be on every like glamour magazine cover. Like it would be crazy. Every time she used searched for a word, landed on the wrong one and changed it, would be celebrated as a national holiday. If she was espousing anything other than sort of politics that are just like marginally to the left of where the Democratic Party, the mainstream supposedly leadership of the party is. I mean, it's stunning. People, they would be falling over themselves. Every single Democrat would know the story of a woman who was a Somali refugee and is now a congresswoman. It's just that her politics are challenging people. And all I got to do is, I'm like, there's no way that's not the future. That's no way that's not the future. And frankly, anybody standing in front of that has got to go. And not only that, people who are not actively helping them have got to either go, or they got to be pressured that they're going to be gone, so that they reorient their sense of where their incentives lie.
Yep, it's go time.
It is go time. Meanwhile, we have a story of Medicare for All in 3 clips. And I'm not sure which one we should play first. I guess maybe we should play Biden first, right? Here is Joe Biden managing to do this all. I don't know how many jump cuts they had to have in this. But I will tell you this. I spoke to a lot of, one of the things that I like about Netroots is that you go out to a bar. I don't have personal contact with a lot of reporters. The vast majority of these reporters are younger than me. Some instances, significantly younger than me. And they go around and they follow candidates. So you find somebody who's been like following Joe Biden for months. They're all concerned about Joe Biden. Like, I don't think it's appropriate for a reporter to sort of like, in some instances, sort of like provide some subjective analysis. But I had 2 or 3 reporters say almost the identical thing to me. Like, he has changed, like in terms of age. He's aged. But, and we all age. I did not have people who follow Bernie Sanders say this to me. And I got news for you. Like, the reporters they form like a personal assessment of the candidate more than they do ideological. They don't assign Bernie fans to follow Bernie Sanders or Biden fans to follow. Most of these reporters, as far as I can tell, some of these anyways, they seem to be largely agnostic. They seem to be just sort of like almost like, how can you really do that? Like, if any policy is, particularly aggressive. So
that's so weird.
Well, it's weird. It's weird. They cover it in a way like almost like if you were like a good reporter and I said, you're going to follow the Orioles. I know you're not a baseball fan. I know you don't particularly like the Orioles, but you're going to go out there and then you're going to tell me everything you see about the Orioles. And so it's not,
Yeah, it's a game to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a job. It's a job. And, but the people following Biden said to me, the weird thing is he moves so slow. And what's interesting about it is that we have a clip after this of Joe Biden. Oh wait, no, that's not what it is. I saw a clip of him where he was behind Barack Obama when Barack Obama signed the ACA. Maybe it's in this thing. And Joe Biden is clapping. And this is about 8 years ago. And Joe Biden's clapping. Yeah, right here. Well, you watch this. You watch Joe Biden now, and you watch how hard he claps right there. And you can't. Joe Biden hasn't moved that fast in about 5 years, I think, as in that clap. That's what's interesting about that. Like, he's really hammering that clap. But go ahead. Let's go back.
It was great being part of the first Democratic debate in Miami. The question was asked whether we support eliminating private health insurance. Some said yes, I said absolutely not. I believe we have to protect and build on Obamacare. That's why I proposed adding a public option to Obamacare as the best way to lower costs and cover everyone. I understand the appeal of Medicare for all, but folks supporting it should be clear that it means getting rid of Obamacare. And I'm not for that. I was very proud the day I stood there with Barack Obama and he signed that legislation. Never before had anyone ever been able to do that in the White House. 20 million Americans gained coverage. Over 100 million with pre-existing conditions finally got protection. And most importantly, peace of mind. I know how hard it is to get that passed. I watched it. Starting over makes no sense to me at all. I knew the Republicans would do everything in their power to repeal Obamacare. They still are. But I'm surprised that so many Democrats are running on getting rid of it. The Affordable Care Act was a historic achievement for President Obama. And if I'm elected president, I'm going to do everything in my power to protect it and build on it.
Okay. That is one of the most cynical takes you could possibly have. The idea that this is getting rid of Obamacare. It is building Obamacare. It is building in. Now,
it's overcoming it in the Hegelian sense.
It's just absurd. It would be like, how can we possibly give up CRT computer monitors? Why would we want to do that? It's such an amazing accomplishment. The idea of a computer. Yes, it's the size of an entire apartment. But why would we want to give that all up for a laptop? Why would you want to do that?
It's like when they were unleading gasoline, saying they want to get rid of cars.
Yeah, exactly. It's incredibly cynical. I can understand the strategy there because you want to make it sound like they're attacking Barack Obama. And but look at this. This is amazing. Look at this guy who's attacking Obamacare too. It's not just Bernie Sanders et al. Who want to get rid of Obamacare from Medicare for all. It's this guy who is willing to do the same thing. It's disgusting.
It's harder for young people to save for a rainy day, let alone retirement.
So Democrats aren't just running on good old ideas like a higher minimum wage. They're running on good new ideas like Medicare for all, giving workers seats on corporate boards.
What? Oh my gosh. Back in the fall of 2018, there's Barack Obama endorsing at least two major campaign ideas. Bernie Sanders.
Why isn't Barack being honest about the fact that if you do Medicare for all, you have to have a 3-month period where no one's allowed to get health care?
Wasn't it like a 4-month period?
I don't know.
Or yeah, you had something like a 4 to 6 month period or something like that.
It's like the doctor lie.
I can't believe Barack Obama is attacking Obamacare in that way. It really seems aggressive. And I will say this too. For those people who think that Joe Biden's plan has a better chance of passing, he wants to expand the public option. P4HCF, this is the Partnership for America's Healthcare Future. This is an industry group that is against Medicare for all. On Joe Biden's plan, we strongly believe every American deserves access to high-quality health care. We agree with the majority of Americans who believe the best way to achieve this is what is working, while coming together to fix what isn't. Unfortunately, Vice President Biden's proposal for a new government insurance system through a public option would undermine the progress of our nation. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, the fight is going to be had. The fight's going to be had. So are you going to enter into that fight saying we want what we want? Or are you going to enter into that fight with like, we're willing to take a fraction of what we want, but the opposition is going to be exactly the same. The opposition is going to be exactly the same. This is a simple question of physics. You've got to knock down a steel door. Do you take a hammer or do you take a ramrod? Which one do you start to approach that door with first? I mean, Joe Biden's really digging deep into the hoping to reach the people who are not paying attention about politics. It's also very poor timing. This is what's fascinating about this. Right now, 35% of Democrats were paying attention to the debates. I don't know how many are paying attention to the primary, but I guarantee you it's about half of what it's going to be in just 2.5 months. In September, early October, we get close to Iowa. By the time you get to Iowa, you're going to have probably 2.5 times more attention paid on the primary. Joe Biden's out there and he's trying to appeal to those people who are not paying attention to politics, which is to say, like, these guys want to get rid of Obamacare, which is like literally the equivalent of saying, like, how can you take away from hardworking Americans the $7.25 that they're making when they try and pass this new bill to raise the minimum wage? They're taking away their minimum wage now and then going to replace it with some other thing. That's basically what his argument is. You want a $15 minimum wage? And why do you have to do this by taking away what they have now?
It's also bizarre the way people talk about the public option, because isn't Medicare for all just a really, really good public option that would put private insurance companies out of business?
The public option they're talking about, I don't know exactly how many people would be eligible for it with Joe Biden. But the public option is not open to the public. You need to prove eligible for it. So it's not even a Medicare buy-in.
Like, it just seems like a sneaky way to get out of having a real public option.
Medicare for all is not an option. It is a public system. You don't have, you're not going to have, most people are not going to have other options. But the right doesn't talk that way, because the right says everybody has access to health care. So everybody will have access to supplemental care. All you'll need is enough money. Otherwise, you're going to have Medicare for all, which is going to pay for all of your health insurance. It's going to pay for everything all of your health care. All right, we'll save. Oh boy, we got to get going. Folks, I'm sorry. Can't get to all the calls. Tomorrow, we'll open up the calls early. I promise. I apologize. We're going to just do news, and I'll do a bunch of IMs, and then we'll get out of here. Bad Sam. Yeah, first day back. You got to give me a little break here. Gabra, formerly from Chicago. Rest in power, Comrade Willem van Spronsen. I think that was the guy who tried to attack a immigration center.
Yeah, I just started checking out the manifesto that he left. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. MV Scott, every person that attacks AOC gets their ass handed to them. Same is going to happen to Pelosi, don't you see? I catch more fish with my fly rod than I do with a spin pole. Just saying. Mila's McKinsey consultant. Sam, I was driving to work this morning, listening to the AM Quickie when I nearly hit a mattress in the middle of the Cross Bronx. Dude, next time, how about a heads up? Bullprog. Did you catch the story of the 69-year-old anarchist being killed while attacking a Washington Detention Center? William Van Spronsen. Yes, we were just talking about that. Tommy D2. I think Pelosi and her ilk, including the big donors, would rather lose as milquetoast centrists than win as true progressives. I think that's true. Adam, remember by the end of the week, we won't be talking about how racist Trump is, but whether Democrats can win when Antifa throws milkshakes. Great bleep forward. There's a very famous, often used old newsreel of Himmler standing outside a concentration camp staring at the Jewish prisoners as if he was at the zoo. Same optics were used by Serbian General Ratko Milosevic in the Balkan War with Croat prisoners. The optics used by Pence are identical. This is a deliberate act. They would have done this in so many ways, but they chose this often used propaganda to show everything this administration does is a test of the threshold of humanity from its base. It's dangerous. Yeah, I don't know how thought out it is, but at least de facto. Jamie's distracting shoulders. What's the best way to get someone to speed up on the current situation in Central America as well as the historical context? A book or a documentary? I don't know of a documentary.
To get caught up on what? History in general? Actually, there's an Oliver Stone series on Netflix.
El Salvador as a fiction movie was actually pretty good, even though it has two douchebag leads. James Woods and Jim Belushi.
He did a documentary series that I actually thought was pretty well done on the 20th century. I forget what it's called, though. It's on Netflix.
Watching things is always easier than reading things.
Luke in Cincinnati. I haven't seen many people talk about Yang's automatic sunset provision on all laws. Thoughts? I'm not aware of it, to be honest with you. But the first thought occurs to me as not a good idea.
Yeah. Just dumb, man.
Yeah, even I'm not on board with that
Yang
one.
is politics for people who haven't been paying attention to politics.
Teacher Jay, make no mistake, getting these migrants sick is the plan. They're going to release these people to the community, and all the news cycle is going to be about the diseases being spread by migrants. Trump already said he wants to put them in sanctuary cities. New Human, interesting interview. The clash of prohibition to American leftist sensibilities is real for sure. Remember feeling it when I found out Zapatista communities ban alcohol entirely, if I understand that correctly. I admit I'm having the same conflict with today's author's stance against anime. DK in Chicago. Sam, we all understand your despair. You're visibly upset today, but you guys are doing more good than you can imagine. Yeah, the subs and YouTube members are going to go up, by the way. Michael, Jamie, Matz, old and new, are educating people like me to channel our rage into language that is genuinely persuasive and not off-putting is invaluable. No joke. I have personally talked to at least a dozen of my peer professional managerial class libs into supporting Bernie exclusively on talking points learned on this show and TMBS. Even when things get hard and it feels like work's impact is not enough, please never stop. Keep doing the work. Keep converting IDW nerds and Nazis and keep educating us so we can spread the word to our broader social circles. We're going to win, and it's due to you and your ilk taking personal material sacrifice to do what is right. Thank you for everything you do. Well, I appreciate that. But there's a lot of people out there who are taking genuine personal sacrifices, and a lot of them are working at the border or like that guy who was leaving water for immigrants, people getting arrested. Former GOP, Sam, your understanding of right-wingers is a little off. Coming from a former right-winger, you have to understand how we think. There are general sets of rules which are shored up by white supremacy, allegiance to authority, and obsession of what we think of our universe should be organized. Things like Christianity, economic conservatism, and patriotism are hollow vessels we hide behind. Most of us are not intelligent enough to study the history and values of these things so we can live with the hypocrisy. This is how a Christian like Mike Pence can view these inhumane conditions and still feel like he's a good person. I always remember, like, at that 9/12 thing, that Glenn Beck thing, interviewing a woman who was like, we need to get back to the Constitution. She said to me, and I was like, what does that mean? She goes, well, this whole church and state thing where it's separated, that's wrong. And I said, well, you know that church and state separation is derived from the Constitution. She said, well, to be honest with you, I don't know the Constitution. I'm going to be taking a course in it in September. She said this to me. I'm going to be taking a course in it in September. And I was like, well, what if you find out that the ideas that you have conflict with the Constitution? I guess I'll have to worry about that then.
Yeah, that's never happened before.
Yeah. All right, 5 more. Algorithmic blazing unfairness. Would you rather be in America's internment camps for migrants or China's re-education camps for Muslims? I should say that you'll recall, it was maybe a month ago where Mike Pompeo was calling these re-education camps, saying that there was 1 million Muslims there. I mean, just contemplate that, 1 million Muslims, 1 million people. Now, the State Department admits there's 4.4 million. Getting re-educated. In parentheses, in quotations. Zero gravitatis. I don't know how widespread it is, but up here in Vermont, we have migrant justice as a very active force for immigrant rights and direct actions. Producer Lauren, apparently Mike Pence was more offended by flying from Vegas to Indianapolis to witness NFL players kneel during the national anthem than witnessing conditions at the detention camp. Hash the fash. Jens, Reed Pelosi and party apparatchiks holding on to power, they don't see it as deliberately holding on. They see it as saving the status quo, being the responsible ones, and so on. It's a possible clutch power, and they see it as a selfless act. They've lost perspective. They see themselves as a solution, not the problem. So this is not about power for the sake of power. It's where the good ones. I think there's some truth to this. I think there's, delusion goes a long way. I mean, she's only going to be around for a couple more years, right? It's just the reality. I do think that's the case. All right, 3 more. Colorado guy. One of the founding grievances of the U.S. was taxation without representation, wealth being siphoned from the majority and given to the rich and powerful minority. Why in today's age, when the same siphoning of wealth is happening via the denial of increased wages and blocking universal health care, et cetera, has this disturbing historical deja vu not been pointed out for what it is more broadly? P.S. LosAmericas.org is another great place to donate to. Support immigrant advocacy. Train Boy, One part of the Acosta Epstein saga that's got no coverage is the plea deal happening during the time when George Bush's Justice Department was exerting massive pressure on federal prosecutors to prosecute politically motivated crimes. Am I going crazy, or is there something to this? It was in between, like, I think Mukasey and what's his face? I've heard people talk about that, but I haven't seen any sort of cohesive argument. Two more. Choco Bobo. I have been a listener for over a year now. The first video I saw was a clip when a caller tried to argue the merits of the bell curve. Watching guys trap him into admitting he was white got me hooked on the show. I just became a member. Can I have a shofar? You sure can. Thank you. And the final I am of the day. Drunk Dalek. Sam, how much of the Pelosi and other establishment Dems pushing back are just examples of the iron law of institutions? I think you'll find that we said that earlier. Maybe you gave this late. The iron law says that people who control institutions care first and foremost about their power within the institution rather than their power of the institution itself. Indeed. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,